December 1944. Snow falls across the Ardennes forest, muffling the rumble of engines that herald Hitler's final gamble in the West. Through the frosted pines, German tank commanders peer through their periscopes at shapes emerging from the winter mist. Not the sleek, predatory forms of their own Panthers, but boxy, angular silhouettes that seem to multiply like apparitions.
1 Panther. 3 Shermans. Another Panther. 5 more Shermans.
The mathematics of the battlefield have become a nightmare written in steel and diesel smoke. Somewhere in the back of every German tanker's mind, a question burns hotter than any engine: how many of these machines does America have? The Panzerkampfwagen V Panther represented the pinnacle of German armored engineering when it entered production in 1943. With its sloped frontal armor, powerful 75mm high-velocity gun, and Maybach engine, it embodied the Reich's technological philosophy: fewer, better, superior. Each Panther required approximately 55,000 man-hours to manufacture. The welding alone demanded craftsmen trained for months. The interleaved road wheels, while providing superior weight distribution, required the entire suspension system to be disassembled to replace a single inner wheel, a process that could take a full day in field conditions. The Panther was a masterpiece, a predator that could destroy a Sherman from ranges the American tank could only dream of reaching. German tankers christened it the finest medium tank of the war. They believed in its superiority the way monks believe in scripture. By war's end, Germany had produced 8,500 of these magnificent machines. It was a remarkable achievement for a nation under constant aerial bombardment, strangled by blockade, its factories targeted nightly by RAF Lancasters and daily by American flying fortresses. Every Panther that rolled from MAN, Daimler-Benz, or Henschel represented a triumph of will over circumstance. Hitler visited these factories, congratulating workers who labored in 12-hour shifts. Goebbels' cameras filmed the sleek cats emerging from assembly halls, their long guns promising vengeance. The newsreels played in cinemas across occupied Europe. German engineering genius would prevail over American quantity. Quality would defeat mere numbers. But numbers have a quality all their own. In Detroit, in Gary, in Pittsburgh and Schenectady, a different philosophy hummed along assembly lines that never stopped, never paused, never retreated. The M4 Sherman was designed not for individual superiority but for industrial immortality. Every component standardized. Every part interchangeable. Welding simplified so that housewives and farmhands could learn the technique in weeks rather than months. The casting process refined until turrets emerged from molds with the regularity of bread from ovens. Where the Panther demanded 55,000 man-hours, the Sherman required fewer than 10,000. Where German factories improvised around bomb damage and material shortages, American plants expanded, adding shifts, adding lines, adding entire buildings to the production landscape. Henry Ford had proven that complexity was the enemy of production. Now that lesson, learned building Model Ts for farmers, would be applied to building tanks for tankers. The Chrysler tank arsenal in Warren, Michigan alone could produce a Sherman every hour at peak output. The Fisher body plant in Grand Blanc, Michigan transformed automobile assembly knowledge into armored warfare. The Lima Locomotive Works in Ohio shifted from building train engines to building tank engines without missing a beat. America didn't just build tanks, it industrialized victory, mass-produced liberation, standardized freedom. The young panzer commanders who rolled into France in 1940 had seen the newsreels too, but different ones. They had watched German armor sweep through Poland in weeks, crack France in 40 days, punch through Soviet lines in Operation Barbarossa's opening months. They understood tanks as weapons of decision, instruments of breakthrough, tools wielded by tactical genius. The idea that tanks could be manufacturing statistics, that armor could become logistics, would have seemed absurd. War was about courage, skill, superior training, technological edge. These were the pillars of Germanic military thought stretching back to Frederick the Great. When they first encountered Shermans in North Africa, the qualitative superiority of their own machines seemed to confirm every assumption. A well-positioned Tiger or Panther could destroy 3, 4, 5 Shermans. Victory reports piled up like autumn leaves. Then came the realization that would haunt the Reich's finest: there was always a 6th Sherman. By 1944, German after-action reports began to read like horror stories written in military bureaucraties. A company commander near can described facing 17 Shermans with 3 operational Panthers. He destroyed 7 Americans before withdrawing.
It felt like defeat.
An officer in the Ardennes reported hitting 11 enemy tanks in one engagement, a record that should have earned celebration. But 14 more Shermans arrived before nightfall, and his unit had to retreat with irreplaceable Panthers abandoned for lack of spare parts that would never arrive. The qualitative advantage that German engineering had purchased with 55,000 man-hours per tank evaporated against an enemy who could absorb losses that would cripple any Wehrmacht division and return the next morning with full strength. The United States produced 49,234 M4 Shermans between 1942 and 1945. When variants are included, the M4A1 through M4A6, each with its own engine and manufacturing improvements, the number swells past 53,000. 53,000 tanks flowing from assembly lines that operated through 3 shifts, 7 days a week, pausing only when new efficiency improvements demanded retooling. For every Panther that rolled from a bomb-damaged German factory, America produced more than 6 Shermans. This wasn't merely production, it was industrial philosophy made manifest. Where Germany husbanded resources, America spent them. Where German workers tightened belts and made do with ersatz materials, American workers earned overtime and ate steak. The contrast wasn't just in tanks but in systems, ideologies, entire ways of organizing human endeavor. And it wasn't just Shermans. For every tank, America produced the trucks to supply it, over 2.5 million of them. The spare parts to maintain it, stored in depots from England to Australia. The fuel to run it, pumped from Texas wells that never ran dry. The ammunition to feed it, manufactured in arsenals that stretched from sea to shining sea. The ships to transport it, launched from yards that delivered more tonnage in 1 year than Germany would produce the entire war. And the replacements, always the replacements. A Sherman destroyed in Normandy might be replaced within days. A Panther knocked out near the same hedgerow might never be replaced at all. Lieutenant Hans von Luck, commanding a panzer company in Normandy, recorded in his diary the moment he understood Germany would lose. It wasn't during a battle. It was watching from concealment as American trucks rolled past his position for 3 hours without interruption, each one carrying supplies, fuel, ammunition, food. He counted over 300 vehicles. His own division was rationing gasoline so strictly that training was forbidden to conserve fuel. The Americans burned more petroleum moving supplies than his entire battalion had available for combat. "We are not fighting an army," he wrote. "We are fighting a force of nature." That force of nature bore a name: American industrial capacity. It was born in the factories of the Industrial Revolution, refined in the mass production revolution, and unleashed in the arsenal of democracy. When President Roosevelt called for 50,000 aircraft a year, skeptics laughed. America produced over 300,000 combat aircraft in total. When military planners requested 25,000 tanks, the number seemed fantastical. The Sherman alone exceeded 50,000 units. This wasn't about better technology. Germany often fielded superior individual weapon systems. This was about the fundamental application of industrial power to military ends. The Sherman didn't need to be better than the Panther. It just needed to be present, functional, and supported, and present in numbers that turned qualitative advantages into irrelevant footnotes. The symbolic power of this disparity haunted German consciousness. Each Panther was hand-fitted, adjusted, perfected. Skilled workers knew individual tanks by their production quirks. The Americans stamped out Shermans with the same indifference that they stamped out spark plugs. To German eyes, trained in traditions of craftsmanship and quality, this seemed almost insulting, that crude, simple machines could overwhelm their sophisticated cats through sheer multiplication. But the American production philosophy wasn't insulting, it was existential. It represented a society where abundance was assumed, where replacement was guaranteed, where good enough produced in overwhelming quantity was a tactical doctrine unto itself. The crews manning these machines understood their place in this equation. American tankers knew the Sherman was undergunned compared to German armor. They nicknamed it the Ronson after cigarette lighter advertisements: lights every time. Grim humor for grim statistics. But they also knew that if their Sherman was knocked out, another would arrive. If they survived, they'd get a new tank. If they didn't survive, another crew already trained and ready would take their place. The Wehrmacht operated on the assumption that skilled veterans were irreplaceable resources requiring years to develop. The U.S. Army operated on the assumption that training, like production, could be industrialized, standardized, and scaled to meet demand. This difference in philosophy extended beyond the factory floor to the battlefield itself. German tactical doctrine emphasized individual excellence: the ace tank commander, the elite unit, the breakthrough by superior forces at a decisive point. American doctrine emphasized system redundancy, multiple overlapping capabilities, assumption of casualties, planning for replacement. Where Germany built Panthers to win tank duels, America built Shermans to win wars of attrition. The question was never whether a Sherman could beat a Panther in single combat. The question was whether Germany could replace its losses faster than America could inflict them. By 1945, That question had been definitively answered. In the Ruhr pocket, intact Panthers sat immobilized for lack of fuel, abandoned by crews who knew no replacement parts would arrive, no recovery vehicles would come, no supply convoys would reach them. These masterpieces of engineering, each representing thousands of hours of skilled labor and Germany's finest metallurgical science, became monuments to a production philosophy that valued individual perfection over systemic sustainability. Meanwhile, Shermans pressed forward, supported by an logistics apparatus that treated each individual tank as an interchangeable unit in a system designed to absorb losses and continue functioning. The cold arithmetic of the war's final year tells the story that propaganda could not obscure. Germany possessed technical knowledge, skilled workers, design excellence, tactical doctrine refined over decades, and the desperation of existential struggle. America possessed coal mines in Pennsylvania, iron ore in Minnesota, oil wells in Texas, wheat fields in Kansas, and factory workers who'd learned their trade building consumer goods in peacetime and simply applied the same principles to instruments of war. When those two philosophies collided across the plains of Europe, quality died beneath the treads of quantity. Not because American tanks were better, in many metrics they were worse, but because American industry had solved the one equation that mattered: how to produce war material faster than it could be destroyed. There is a photograph from April 1945, taken somewhere in Germany's dying heartland. A knocked-out Panther sits in a village square, still magnificent in defeat, its long gun pointing at nothing. Around it, like mourners at a funeral, sit 4 destroyed Shermans. Some German photographer probably took this image as proof of Teutonic superiority, 1 German tank for 4 American. But outside the frame, down that village road and stretching back to Normandy, to England, to the Atlantic, to America's inexhaustible factories, roll columns of replacement Shermans that would arrive by week's end. The Panther would sit where it died, unrepairable and irreplaceable, a monument to excellence that couldn't sustain itself. In the end, the Reich learned what empires throughout history have eventually learned: wars are not won by the best weapons but by the most weapons. Not by the finest soldiers but by the most soldiers. Not by superior will but by superior supply. The Panther was everything German military tradition promised: deadly, advanced, feared. The Sherman was everything American industrial culture provided: available, maintainable, numerous. When those two philosophies met across Europe's killing fields, German tactical excellence purchased temporary victories. American industrial capacity purchased final victory. 8,500 Panthers.
Each one a masterpiece. Each one insufficient.
53,000 Shermans.
Each one adequate.
Together, overwhelming. The assembly line that never stopped had broken an empire that believed quality would triumph over quantity. But the true lesson transcended tank production. It spoke to the power of systems over heroes, sustainability over perfection, abundance over scarcity. In that contrast lay the difference between societies: one that hoarded resources and bet everything on elite performance, another that unleashed capacity and bet on systematic superiority. The Panthers were magnificent. The Shermans were enough. And enough, delivered without pause, proved more powerful than magnificent could ever be.